Hey everyone, Kevin here. Today, I want to show you how you can use VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel. VLOOKUP is one of the most popular functions in Excel. If there's a good function to know how to use, this is a really good one to add to your toolbox. In fact, when I worked at Microsoft, this is a function that I used all the time. So what is VLOOKUP and what does it even stand for? VLOOKUP stands for vertical lookup, and it allows you to look up information in a vertical list. So let's take an example. Let's imagine that you have a customer ID and you want to know the customer's name. So you have a list with all the IDs and the customer names. You can look up that ID and then get the customer name back. Or maybe you have two different tables of information and you want to bring them together. You can use VLOOKUP to join those two separate tables. It's really versatile. Today, we're going to start off by going in depth on how you use VLOOKUP. Then I want to show you a variation of VLOOKUP called HLOOKUP, where you can look up information in a horizontal list. And then at the very end, I'll save the best for last, I want to show you how you can use something called XLOOKUP, which improves upon both VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. Now, if all of this sounds a little bit overwhelming and maybe a little bit confusing, don't worry, we're going to walk through all of this step by step. And if you want to follow along, I've also included a sample workbook in the description. You can click on that and then you can follow along with this video. All right, well, why don't we jump on the PC and let's start looking up. Here I am in Microsoft Excel now, and once again, if you want to follow along, I've included a link to this workbook in the description of this video. And in this workbook, we're going to start all the way on the left-hand side with this sheet called VLOOKUP Exact Match. We're going to work our way through here, and by the end of this video, you are going to be an expert in looking up using VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and also XLOOKUP. Okay, so let's get started with a really simple example that'll demonstrate how you can use VLOOKUP. Right here on this sheet, I have a table of customer information. Over on the left-hand side, I have the customer ID. There are 5 different customers. Then you see the customer name, and then there's some notes about the customer. Now over here, I want to be able to type in a customer ID. So let's say I type in customer ID number 4. Once I type that in, I want to look up this value over in this table, and then I want to get the customer name back. So this is just a really simple example. And we're going to dive in just a moment, but before we dive into the nitty-gritty of how you use VLOOKUP, I want to take a moment to talk about how you should organize your data. Over in the lookup table, over on the left-hand side, you want to make sure that the value that you're looking up is the leftmost column. So here I'm looking up the customer ID. And over here in this table, the customer ID right now is already the leftmost column. So if you have to rearrange your data so the lookup value is over on the left, feel free to do that before using VLOOKUP. Along with making sure that the lookup value is in the leftmost column, you also want to make sure that your lookup column is sorted in ascending order. This helps VLOOKUP make sure that it's finding the right value. So here you see that I have 1 at the top and then it grows all the way down to 5. Also, if let's say you're looking up different names, you want to make sure it's in alphabetical order, starting with A all the way down to Z. So let's say that it's not in ascending order. It's easy to change that. You can go up to the header of your column, you could right click on that, and then you can go down to sort, and here you could sort A to Z. Also, alternatively, you can also go up to the data tab up on top, and here you can click on filter. So here I'll toggle it off and I'll toggle it back on. And over here, I can click on the filter, and here too, I could also sort from smallest to largest. Next, you also want to make sure that there's a common field that you can use to make a connection. So over here, I'm looking up the customer ID, and this table also has a customer ID. So when I look up 4, I'll be able to find a match over here. Now I wouldn't want to look up, say, the address of the customer because this table doesn't have an address, so I wouldn't be able to match on anything. So that wouldn't really make any sense. Lastly, it also helps tremendously when you do a VLOOKUP to look up on a table of information. And you don't necessarily have to make it a table, but it makes it a lot easier and it'll also help you avoid some errors. So you might be wondering, well, how do I turn data into a table? Well, let's jump to this next sheet here called VLOOKUP Make Table. And I'll show you how you can make a table. So right now, this is organized in what looks like a table, but it's not an official Excel table. And it's really easy to turn this into a table. Right here, once I have all of the data selected, you can go up to Insert up here on the top tabs, and here's an option to convert it into a table. When I hover over, you also see that the shortcut key is Control T, so I could also press that to make it a table. Let's try the shortcut key. I'll press Control T, and here it says, what's your table? And so I've already selected it, so here it identifies all of it. And my table has headers, so I'll make sure to check this box and then click on OK. And look at that. I now have a table of information. So that worked exactly how I wanted it to. Now let's go back to the previous sheet. We've gone through a bunch of information about how you should structure your data before running a VLOOKUP. And all of that's very important because this ensures that when we run the VLOOKUP, we'll be running it correctly. Next, I want to enter my VLOOKUP function. So over here, for this cell where I want the name to appear, I'll click in here, and then let's go up to the formula bar, and I'm going to click on this FX symbol. Let's click on that. This opens up a prompt where we can enter in our function, and we want to use VLOOKUP, so right up here, type in VLOOKUP, and then click on Go. Right here, I see the function, so let's double click on that. This now opens up another prompt where I can enter in all of my function arguments. And we're going to walk through these to help you understand what they mean. So let me pull this down a little bit so we can see it and we can see all of our data up above. First, I need to enter a lookup value. And this is bolded here, meaning that it's a required argument that I need to enter. And the lookup value, well, I want to look up customer ID number 4. So I'm going to click over in this cell, and that's now selected F2. That's my lookup value. We're going to look up 4. Right down below, here I can verify that it's looking up 4. Here it's showing me the value right here. Next, it asks me to enter the table array, and this is where I'm doing the lookup. And over here, I want to look up against this table. So here I'll select the entire table. And so one of the interesting things is since we define this as a table, here it refers to that table. Now, once again, I mentioned that it's a very good practice to turn your table array into a table first. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? Well, let's say maybe I added another customer. The table would automatically account for that. If instead I went through and let's say I just selected some cells, if let's say I added another customer or another row, it wouldn't account for it, and then maybe my lookup wouldn't work properly. So it's a good practice to create a table. Now you might also be wondering, well, instead of creating a table, couldn't I just select all of these columns and then run a VLOOKUP? One downside with that is let's say you have content underneath your table. Those might also be included in the VLOOKUP. So once again, as a best practice, create a table and then you could just search across that table. It tends to avoid errors in the long run. I've now selected my table, and next there's another argument here called the column index number. So right now I'm looking for the value 4 in this table over here. So it looks over in the first column and it says, is there a number 4? And here it'll find the number 4. Now this next argument says, well, which column do you then want to return? So I've selected this table and it has 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. And I want to send the name back, and the name is the second column. So right here, I'll enter the number 2. And last, there's something called range lookup. And in a moment, I'll go into more detail on what that means. But for now, let's set it to false. We want this to be an exact match. What I mean by that is when it finds customer ID number 4, it'll look in this list. And only if it finds the exact value for number 4 will it return the customer name. Let's say I sent in customer ID 3.5 or 4.5 or customer ID 6. Well, there is no exact match, so that would return an error. I want this to be an exact match. So once again, I'll enter false. And a little later, I'll show you when you might want to enter true for this. Now this all looks good, and down below, I can already see the output. It looks like Wholesome Foods is customer ID number 4. I'll click on OK, and here I see the exact value I was expecting. Now, because I have the VLOOKUP set up, here I can type in another customer ID. So I could type in customer ID number 1, and here I see the associated customer. I could also type in customer ID number 5, and that'll show me the customer associated with number 5. So pretty cool stuff. Now we have VLOOKUP working. With the VLOOKUP, let's say that maybe I enter a customer ID that doesn't exist. So let's say I enter number 6. Right here you can see there is no customer 6. When I press enter, I get this NA error back. and it doesn't really look that friendly. Now, if you've done VLOOKUPs before, you'll start to recognize that anytime you get this, it simply means that it looked up for that exact value, it didn't find a match, and it returns this back. But once again, it's not that friendly, so we can improve upon this. To improve upon this, we can use another function called IFERROR. If there's an error, we can show something a little bit friendlier. Right up here on the formula bar, let's click right after the equal sign and before the VLOOKUP, and let's type in IFERROR. So I'll type that in, and then let's open the parentheses. And right now, there are two different arguments. One of them is the value, and one of them is the value if error. So the first one is, if there is no error, what should it display? And if there is no error, well, I just want to show the output of the VLOOKUP. So I'll leave the VLOOKUP here. But let's say there is an error. I'll enter in a comma here, and this is where I enter my second argument. I could just put in some quotes, and maybe I just say not found, just so it's a little bit friendlier. I'll close the quotes, and then I'll close the parentheses. Once I'm done entering that in, I'll hit enter, and here now you can see that it looks a lot friendlier. So if I type in customer 5, well, we have a customer 5, so it shows me that customer name. But here if I type in customer 6, now it says not found instead of NA. So that looks a little bit nicer. Next, I want to show you how closest match works. In this example, we were looking for an exact match, but when would you use a closest match? And for that, let's go down to the different worksheets over here and click on the one called VLOOKUP Closest Match. On this next worksheet, I have two different tables of information. I have cookie orders over here. So here I have an order ID, and then I have a certain number of cookies that customer ordered. And I want to offer some free cookies just as an incentive to order more. So here, for example, if you order 100 cookies, we'll throw in 5 for free. So you get 5% free cookies. Or if you order 400 cookies, you get 20 free cookies. So just as an incentive to drive more people to order cookies. Now I want to put in how many free cookies I should include in each order, but I don't want to have to go through and say, hey, look at how many cookies they ordered and then figure out where that sits on this table. And in fact, when you look at this, here someone placed an order for 26 cookies. There is no 26 in this other table. This is where we can use closest match. Another good example is, let's say you're calculating taxes and you have different tax brackets. That's another instance where you might want to use closest match. Just like we did before, let's go over into cell C2 and we're going to enter in our VLOOKUP formula. Once again, let's go up to the formula bar and click on the FX. This opens up insert function, and right down here you should see VLOOKUP as a recent function. I'll click on this one. Once again, we can enter in the different function arguments. Here I need to enter my lookup value, and I want to look up how many cookies they ordered. So if someone orders 26, well, how many free cookies should we give? So here the lookup value is 26. Right down here I need to select the table array, and I'm looking it up against this table over here. So here I'll select this table. Right down here it says, well, what index or what column do you want to send back? So here I'll look up 26. And here it's going to look it up against the leftmost column, and when it finds out what bucket it falls in, then I want to give back how many free cookies I should include, and that's the second column. So I'll enter a 2 here. Now with range lookup, this time instead of doing an exact match, I want to use a closest match. And if I don't enter anything at all in this field, it'll default to using closest match. So I'll just leave it blank, and then let's click on OK. And look at that, using the VLOOKUP, I now know how many free cookies I should include as each one of these orders. And so you might be wondering, well, how does closest match work exactly? So here, let's just take a look at this example. A customer ordered 26 cookies, and that falls between 0 and 100. So it's greater than 0, but it's less than 100. So it finds the closest value that's less than it. So the closest value to 26 is 0, and also 100 is close, but it falls back to 0 because that's less than 26. So here it uses this value. With 101, it's greater than 100, but it's less than 200. So it falls back to the closest value that's less than. And so here in this case, we include 5 cookies. So there you could get a feel for how it works. Or even here's another example where it's 392. So it's between 3 and 400. It's closer to 400, but 400 is greater than it. So it falls back to 300, and then we've included 15 free cookies. Now, hopefully you're starting to get a feel for how VLOOKUP works. And the great thing is when you use VLOOKUP, your two tables don't have to be on the same sheet. In fact, you can have them on completely separate sheets. Let's jump over to the next sheet called VLOOKUP Across Sheets. And here's the same exact example. Except with this example, I don't have the other table sitting right next to it. Instead, the other table is on this second sheet. So let's see how we could run the VLOOKUP to get the same results. Here again, I'll click into this cell. Let's click on FX up on the formula bar. This opens up the insert function. Let's select VLOOKUP. Right here, the lookup value, once again, I'm looking up the cookies ordered. Next, I need to type in the table array. So I'll click over here and then let's jump to this next sheet. And this is the table I want to look up against. So I'll select that. And here, just like we did previously, I want to return the second column. And here with the range lookup, I'll leave that blank so it'll be a closest match. Next, let's click on OK. And look at that, the VLOOKUP works just like before, except this time it's working across different sheets. Next, let's go down and let's click into HLOOKUP to see how we can do a horizontal lookup. Now, so far we've been doing vertical lookups. Our table is organized in a vertical list. But what if you're looking up against a table that's organized horizontally? We can use something called HLOOKUP, and it's the exact same concept as VLOOKUP, but we're using it against horizontal data. So let's just test this out to see how it looks. And right up here, let's select this cell here, and then let's go up to the formula bar and click on the FX. This once again opens up the insert function prompt, and this time let's type in HLOOKUP. Click on Go, and then select HLOOKUP. Hopefully by now, this prompt is starting to look very familiar. First off, we need to select the lookup value. And once again, I'm looking up how many cookies were ordered. Right down below, this is now my table array that I'm looking up against. I want to see how many they ordered, and then I'll decide how many free cookies to give back. So here I'll select table array and I'll select this table. Now the key difference here is this is now a horizontal table instead of a vertical table. And that's fine. It works just the same, except we need to use a function called HLOOKUP. And over here it says the row index number. So it's not a column index, it's a row index. So in this table over here, we want to send back the second row. So here I'll type in a 2. Also here for range lookup, I'll just leave it blank. We're going to do a closest match again, and then let's click on OK. Now here, once again, we see that if a customer ordered 26 cookies, well, for 26 cookies, that's between 0 and 100. So we give 0 free cookies back. One of the things you'll notice though is I got this NA for all these other values. So I don't think it's working quite right. Let's click back into the formula bar to see what's going on. Here for the table array, I'm just looking at these cells. These are relative cells. Here as I go down, if I click into this cell, you see that it automatically adjusts the table that it's looking against. I don't want it to do that. So instead I can go up to the top and I need to make it an absolute reference. So as I pull this formula down, it continues to look at this table. To do that, I can press the F4 key. I could press the F4 key again, and then I'll hit enter. And now you see that the formula works properly. That's one of the downsides of using a horizontal table in Excel. You can't properly define it as a table, so you have to make sure that you use an absolute reference. And I think most people, when they organize data in Excel, they tend to use a vertical list. Horizontal lists aren't as popular, but I did want to touch on how you can use HLOOKUP as well, depending on how your data is formatted and organized. Now by now, your lookup skills should be getting pretty good, but what if I told you there's an even better version of looking up, and that's called XLOOKUP. It can do everything that VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP can do, but it can do even more. On its own, it can search on vertical and horizontal lists, so you don't need separate functions. And it does a lot more than just that. And in a moment, we're going to run through to see what some of those additional benefits are. And for that, let's go down and click on the worksheet called XLOOKUP. I'm now on the XLOOKUP worksheet, and let's take a look at how this works. Over on the left-hand side, I have a table with a whole bunch of cookie orders. I have an order ID, I have what product they ordered, how many we sold, the date, and then I have a bunch of empty columns. I have the revenue per cookie, the cost per cookie, and the order profit, and I don't know what those are. Luckily though, I have a nice reference table over here that tells me how much revenue per cookie, how much cost per cookie, and then here I have the cookie type. And look at that, I can match based on the cookie type. So here I have the cookie name, and here the product name matches with the cookie type exactly. In fact, if I click on this dropdown, I can see that all of the cookie types are exactly the same. So we could certainly use VLOOKUP to fill this out, but it's not going to work quite as well. Now, first off, one thing to notice is my cookie type is not the leftmost column. In fact, here it's the rightmost column. So if I wanted to run a VLOOKUP, well, first off, I'd have to move the cookie type over onto the left-hand side. But why do that? We can use XLOOKUP and we don't have to rearrange our data. So let's go over here and first off, let's pull in the revenue per cookie for all these different cookie types. And let's use XLOOKUP. Just like we did before, let's click on the FX. Within insert function, let's type in XLOOKUP and then click on go. And here you should see the XLOOKUP function. Let's click on that and then click on OK. This once again opens up function arguments, and at first glance, you'll see that there's more that we can fill in, but more isn't necessarily bad. Right here, you see the 3 bolded values, and these are the required values. And down below, you have some optional different settings that you can configure. And so really, XLOOKUP is going to give you a lot more power. And let's start with the just simplest example. First, I want to look up a value. And just like we did with VLOOKUP, well, our lookup value is over here. We're going to look up chocolate chip, and we want to look it up in this table. So over here, I need to select the lookup array. Now, previously with VLOOKUP, we selected this entire table. We don't have to do that anymore. Instead, I'm just going to select this column. I want to look up in this column to find that value. So one of the nice things is, once again, I don't have to rearrange my data. Over here, I want to select what I want to return. So I'll click over here and I want to return the revenue per cookie. So in this same table, the revenue is over here. So I'll select that column. So I don't have to worry about entering in a column index or a row index. Instead, I just select what I want to get back. So it's a little bit more intuitive to use. Now, some of the other benefits down here, there's something called if not found. Remember earlier when we got that NA error and we used another function called IFERROR to make it a little friendlier? Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Here, you can simply type in something like, let's say not found. And remember, this is optional, so you don't necessarily have to do this, but here it's just built directly in. In a moment, we'll come back to what match mode and search mode mean, but for now, we have our basic XLOOKUP working, so let's click on OK. So look at that, XLOOKUP has now returned the revenue per cookie. So it looks up here, chocolate chip, here it finds chocolate chip, and it returns this value over to the left for $5. So that's pretty cool. You don't have to rearrange your data, and here it basically does what VLOOKUP does, but it has a little bit more power. Next, let's do the same thing just to make sure we really understand this. Let's do it again with cost per cookie. Here, I'll click on the cell. Let's go back up to FX, and once again, let's click on XLOOKUP. This opens up the function arguments, and over here, I want to look up this product type, and I want to look up over here. So I want to find the cookie type over in this table. Next, I want to return the cost. So I'll select this column. This is what I want to return back. And then here, if not found, I'll just leave that for now. I don't necessarily need that. And I mentioned we'll come back to these other items in a little bit. So all of this looks good. Let's click on OK. And right there, I see my cost per cookie. It just automatically populates all of that right here. Okay, so next I want to calculate the profit. And to do this, I'm going to combine multiple functions together. And this is going to show you some even more power of XLOOKUP. So in this order profit cell right here, let's enter in equals sum. So to calculate the profit, well, I want to sum the revenue and the cost. So basically my profit on an individual chocolate chip cookie is $3, 5 minus 2. And then I want to multiply it by the units sold. And I can do all of this in just one formula up here on the formula bar. So first, let's enter the sum. And next, I want to use XLOOKUP. So let's enter in XLOOKUP, and here I'll enter in the function. Now, if we want to make it easy, here we could click over on FX again, and let's fill out the XLOOKUP. This, once again, opens up the function arguments. And the lookup value, well, I want to look up chocolate chip. So I'll select that. Over here, I'll select the lookup array, and it's this column again. I want to look it up over here. Now, for the return array, one of the things that's really interesting is I can return multiple values, and that's one of the powers of XLOOKUP. So here, I want to return both the revenue and the cost. And then sum is going to sum up the revenue, it'll sum the cost, and that'll give me the profit on a per cookie basis. Now here for if not found and all these others, I'll leave those as is for now, and I'll click on OK. So here now I have my XLOOKUP in place. Now I'm going to take the value or the profit per individual cookie, and I want to multiply this by the total number of units sold. And then I'll close my parentheses and hit enter. And just like that, using XLOOKUP together with sum, I'm able to get the order profit or the overall order profit. So one of the really neat things with XLOOKUP is I can return multiple values. And on the topic of multiple values, why don't we dig in and see exactly how this works over on the next sheet called XLOOKUP Return Multiple Values. Now previously, to get the revenue per cookie and the cost per cookie, we entered XLOOKUP into one column and then we entered it into the next column. But instead of doing that, I can simply pull all of that information back in just one formula. How do we do that? Well, once again, let's type in XLOOKUP. And then let's open the parentheses. Now, just to make it easier, I'll click into FX, but you could also enter the formula right here. This opens up the function arguments again. And once again, the lookup value, I want to look for chocolate chip. And over here, I can select my lookup array. And once again, my lookup array is over here, so I'll select this column right there. And next, I need to select my return array. And just like before, you can select multiple columns to return. So here I'll select both revenue and also cost, and then I'll pull it down. And over here, I'll leave the others as is, and then let's click on OK. Now check that out. So not only did it return the revenue, but it also returned the cost per cookie. So with just one formula, it sent an array back and I was able to fill that out. So that is pretty cool. Now, if I want to pull this formula all the way down, once again, I need to make sure that these are absolute references. So here I'll select F4, F4, and I'll just set it so this table is all just an absolute reference. Then I'll hit enter, and here I could pull the formula all the way down. And here you'll see then that it will automatically look up both the revenue and the cost for each individual cookie. So this works exactly how I want it to, but this is yet another benefit of XLOOKUP. Now you might be thinking XLOOKUP is pretty powerful, and I should probably be using this over VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. But wait, there is more. Let's click into the next sheet called XLOOKUP Wildcard Match, and let's see how this works. Within XLOOKUP, there's an option called Match Mode, and here you can see all of the different options. Now in VLOOKUP, we were able to do an exact match, and we were also able to do an exact match, but if none was found, to return a smaller item. With XLOOKUP, we have even more control. We could find an exact match, but if it doesn't find any, it can return the next larger item. So if you remember the earlier example with the closest match over here, maybe instead of falling back to the smallest value, maybe I want to go up to the largest value. I can configure that using VLOOKUP. Also down below, I can also set a wildcard match. So maybe I want to know, well, which one is the first customer over here that starts with a W? I can use XLOOKUP to do that. And let's test this out using option number 2. I'll click in this cell and let's once again click on the FX. Over here, let's select XLOOKUP. For the lookup value, I'm simply going to enter quotes and then I'll type in a W and then I'll type in an asterisk and then I'll type in another quote. So I want to find a W and I don't care what comes after the W. That's what the asterisk does. Over here, I need to select my lookup array, and just like we did before, I'll select the customer name right here. So I want to look up the customer over here. And if it finds a customer over here, well, I want it to return the full customer name. So I'll simply select this as my return array. Now right down here, I need to select the match mode, and I want this to be a wildcard match. So I'll enter 2 and then click on OK. And look at that, the first customer with a W in its name is Wholesome Foods, and I get that value back. So once again, this is yet another benefit of XLOOKUP. Lastly, I also want to show you the last big benefit of XLOOKUP, and that allows you to define how it should search. Let's go over, and this is the very last sheet in the set. So congratulations for making it to the very end. Once we go through this, you'll have a very good grasp of how XLOOKUP works. On this sheet, I want to know when Lola's last order was. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see Lola is one of our customers, and she had an order on January 16th, and it looks like her last order was on July 13th. Now with VLOOKUP, it's going to look from top to bottom. So if I were to run a VLOOKUP, it would return this value. But the nice thing is with XLOOKUP, I have access to these different search modes. So here, just like with VLOOKUP, I could just start at the top and then work my way down. But now I can also start from the bottom and work my way up if I enter -1 in for the search mode. I also have binary search as an option, and I can enter 2 or -2. And it's the same concept. I could start from the top and work my way down, or start from the bottom and work my way up. With a binary search though, you have to make sure that you sort the data in either ascending or descending order, so kind of like we did with VLOOKUP earlier. Now let's try this, and let's try to find what the last item was with this -1. I'll go up here and let's click into this cell. It doesn't really matter which cell we enter this in, and let's click on the FX. Next, let's click on XLOOKUP. For this one, we want to look up Lola. So I'll type in Lola, and I'll make sure that I enter it in quotes. So there we're looking for Lola, and here I want to look it up in this customer column. So here I'll select the entire column with the customers, and I'll just highlight it all the way to the bottom. And then for the return array, well, I want to get the order date back, so I'll go ahead and let's highlight this column. And if not found, I'll leave that as is. I don't care about match mode, but down below, I can now set the search mode. Once again, for this, I want to start from the bottom and I want to work my way up. So for that, just like we saw earlier, if I go down just a little bit, we see that to perform a reverse search starting at the last item, I need to enter a -1. So let me type in a -1 here. Now I'll click on OK, and here now we see that Lola's last order was on 7/13, and here I can confirm that. If I go down the list, we see Lola and her last order was on 7/13. And that now wraps up all of the functionality of XLOOKUP. And so hopefully now by going through these different examples, you're starting to realize the power of using XLOOKUP, especially compared to VLOOKUP and also HLOOKUP. In fact, there's really not much of a reason to even still use VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP when you have XLOOKUP. It can do everything that both VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP can do, but it has even more power and customizability. All right, well, if you now know how to use VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and also XLOOKUP, please give this video a thumbs up. To see more videos like this in the future, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, if you want to see me cover any other topics on this channel, leave a note down below in the comments. That's where I get a lot of my video ideas from. All right, well, that's all I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I hope to see you next time. Bye.